So it's another day of training camp, and once again, the defense showed up in a really big way. Let's talk about exactly how they did that and what really stood out from the day, starting right now. What's going on, Lions fans? Welcome to the Pride of Detroit training camp observation. I'm Miko, and in today's video, we are once again going to go over the biggest news, takeaways, and observations to come out of Lions training camp today. Now, today's practice was a little bit different from what we're normally used to, and it's basically because the Lions held something more of a scrimmage today. Now, this isn't out of the norm from their normal offseason workouts, but typically they hold this type of practice at Ford Field. But due to the WWE being in town and SummerSlam and all of those, determining factors, the Lions had to scrap that event for this year and essentially just turn this practice into that same type of event. Now, once practice did kick off, it was a day that was heavily dominated by the defense. And this has been a reoccurring theme so far throughout training camp. The offense has definitely had their days and they definitely had their moments, but for the most part, the defense has kind of been the deciding factor in a lot of these practices, and we've seen a lot of impressive performances from that side of the ball. Now, one could argue that this is mainly due to the fact that the defense had the most amount of ground to make up going into this offseason. And while the Lions offense definitely has a lot of firepower, the amount of growth that we should probably reasonably expect to see probably isn't nearly as wide as what we're seeing from the defense. With that said, though, what the defense has been putting on the field is very impressive because it's not just the secondary and it's not just a player here or there, it's the entire unit as a whole. And in today's scrimmage, again, we saw plays being made at just about every level throughout the scrimmage. When we were looking at the defensive line, Aidan Hutchinson had a couple sacks. Josh Pascal, Charles Harris, Romeo Okwara both were picking up sacks or tackles for loss. Aleem McNeil demonstrated that slimmer frame, but at the same time still demonstrated great power and athleticism in both being able to, bat down passes and being able to still make plays in the backfield. That front 4 to 5 guys has been extremely dominant throughout training camp so far. Again, whether it's Hutch, Charles Harris, Josh Pascal, or Aleem McNeil, these guys are just finding new ways to show up. And if again, to even talk about Romeo, another player who, suffered from an injury last year or the year before and was struggling to come back last year, he's finally kind of putting it all together and starting to show, more consistent progression throughout, these training camp practices. And that's only going to help benefit this Lions defense as they start to move into the season. Again, we all know about what James Houston can bring as a pass rusher, but if you're able to get a Romeo Okwara that can go out there and, pick up a sack or two a game, that just continues to add to the depth and the versatility that this defensive line will be able to roll out with. And then when you look at the linebackers, we've all, been extremely excited about Jack Campbell and what he's going to possibly bring to the defense. But let's not forget about Alex Anzalone. Alex Anzalone, once again, making plays where the Lions need him most. He had a great tackle for loss on Jameer Gibbs in the backfield and also had a, we'll say, questionable interception. He was definitely credited with an interception, but depending on who you ask, it may or may not hit the ground. Either way, Alex is once again showcasing his ability to be at the right place at the right time. Even Derek Barnes made a great, pass breakup while covering Sam Laporta that led to a great interception by Savion Smith. I know it's early and it's just training camp and the Lions are really just going against their own offense, but if the defense can find a level of confidence, if they can find a level of consistency and rhythm, it really gives you a certain level of confidence that once they start rolling into the regular season or even just preseason games, that we'll see a much improved defense. Now, they're going to have a day off tomorrow, and then they will eventually have their joint practice with the Giants. And that'll actually really give this defense a real test. Do they just have their own offense figured out, or can they reasonably match up with an opposing offense and give them the same type of headaches that they seem to be giving the Lions offense so far throughout training camp? Now, while I did just talk about how dominant the Lions defense was in practice, let's not get this twisted. The offense did find success. It's just not in the same ways that the Lions defense did. When the Lions did find success on the offensive end, it was usually because Jared Goff was going to his trusted receiver in Amon-Ra St. Brown, and that connection was leading to big plays or just consistent plays down the field. Again, that doesn't mean that no one else was making plays, but if we're talking about consistency and if we're talking about, who was really helping the Lions get into scoring positions, well, It was Goff and St. Brown. And that's just kind of the tandem that we have to somewhat become accustomed to. And it's a good tandem to count on. Jared Goff, once again, being able to go into the season and know that he has a safety blanket in Amon-Ra St. Brown and know that he has a competitor on the outside that can literally probably win most matchups is going to be a huge benefit to these offense. Now, obviously, that's going to require other players around Amon-Ra to step up and provide more security and more options to Jared Goff. And let's be honest, there were opportunities throughout this scrimmage where Jared Goff did link up with other players. If you haven't seen it by now, there's an amazing highlight on the Lions Twitter of Jared Goff finding Sam Laporta across the middle, and Sam's making an amazing catch and making the job for Jared Goff a little bit easier. Jameer Gibbs even had a few good runs that actually helped set up the Lions for another scoring opportunity later in that scrimmage, where Graham Glasgow and Penei Sewell were able to open up a lane for David Montgomery to get an easy walk-in score. So again, yes, the defense is looking dominant, but the offense is finding success too. I think what it really just boils down to is for the offensive side of the football, we just would love to see a little more versatility, or at least I know I would. It's great, to have an Amon-Ra St. Brown and know that you have a weapon in him that you can trust. But guys like Laporta, guys like Gibbs, JMO when he comes back, those guys are going to be just as important to the success of this offense. And again, not saying that they're not contributing in practice, but when we're looking at what the defense is doing and how they're getting plays made by a number of different players, you would just love to see that same type of spreading of the wealth on the offensive side as well. Now, speaking of spreading the wealth offensively, there is one player that I would love to highlight during this video, and that is wide receiver Dylan Drummond. Now, Dylan Drummond has had two really good practices the last couple days, and Dan Campbell was asked about it during his media availability, and he had a lot of praise to heap on Dylan. Dylan Drummond wasn't one of those rookies that the Lions rushed out to go sign right after the draft ended, but he did win himself a spot after rookie minicamp. And since then, he's slowly made his way up the depth chart. And if you ask Dan Campbell, he's been relatively pleased with the play of Drummond. And with Tom Kennedy and Trinity Benson both suffering injuries so far in training camp, it really opens up the door for a guy like Drummond to potentially be in heavy competition for that wide receiver 6 or wide receiver 5 spot. Now, of course, he's going to have to outduel Denzel Mims, who was also having an amazing camp and also had an amazing practice today, showing both toughness and the willingness to go out and, make plays on the field and be utilized in a number of different ways. But again, this is kind of a testament to the level of talent that this Lions roster has in comparison to past seasons. You may face a situation where a guy like Dylan Drummond doesn't make the final cut, but if you can still stash him on your practice squad, that's a great amount of depth that you can definitely tap into in the event that you suffer some sort of injury at the wide receiver spot later in the season. With that said, Drummond is definitely someone that we should all be adding to our UDFA watch list, along with the likes of Starling Thomas and Stephen Gilmore. So, guys, that's going to do it for today's Pride Detroit training camp observation video. If you're looking for more information on today's practice or just want some additional details, definitely check out the links in the description where you can find a link to Eric's latest observation article or the podcast that he and Jeremy do together right after Lions practices. They go into way more detail and can definitely break down some of the things that stood out to them throughout practice. Also, if you really enjoyed this video, let us know in the comment section below. Also, if you have any other questions or things that you would love information on, let us know in the comment section. Also, be sure to subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. And if you are subscribed, definitely share it with a friend and definitely be sure to hit that notification bell so you can be notified of any time we upload a brand new video. So once again, guys, I'm Miko here at Pride Detroit, and I'll catch you in the next one.